Our worthy forefathers, let's give them a cheer. To climates unknown did courageously steer. Through oceans to deserts for freedom they came, and dying bequeathed us their freedom and fame. In freedom we're born, and in freedom we'll live. Our purses are ready, steady, friends, steady. Not as slaves, but as free men, our money will give.
Thank you all for being here today on our second out of 3 spring semester conversations with the Historical Society of Old Abington. And we'll start today, as we start all of our programs, with a salute to the flag. So those who care to and are capable, please stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. For those who don't know me, my name is Doug Ulwick, and I am the president of the Historical Society of Old Abington. We were established in the 1930s, and I think I've been president for 14 years now. Good Lord. But anyhow, and we do 6 programs, which we now call conversations, every year, 3 in the fall and 3 in the spring. We used to do January, February, and the weather just got ridiculous. So now we do March, April, May, and have done well with that. And back in the day, we used to hire someone, give them an honorarium to come in and talk with us about 45 minutes on any historic topic that seemed appropriate. That proved in the long run to be very narrowing. There are only so many people who can do that. The gentleman sitting next to me is a person who could do that, but we have changed the format to be a conversation. And we welcome conversation. That's the other thing I want to say. And I know Don has someone in the audience reading something, and I'm reading something as part of today's program as well. But also, you as the audience are welcome to ask questions. Something's not clear, something we maybe didn't address. And there will also, at the end, be time for that. This is the second of 2 programs about Rockland that's celebrating its 150th anniversary this year. The first one was a month ago, and Van Heffern, who's sitting right over there, was our guest for that. And it's not up on cable yet. I just learned it's probably coming up this coming week on cable and also on YouTube. So you'll be able to see parts 1 and part 2, which is today. We have one more program to present, one more conversation to present, and there's a big switch coming with it. It won't be in this building. It will be at the Parish Hall at the United Church of Christ in Abington, right on Route 18. The issue is handicapped accessibility. As you may have noticed, we don't have it in this building. It's something I know the trustees are hoping to work on, but it doesn't currently exist. And our guest, one of our guests for that program, gets around with, this was a new one on me, rollator. It's a form of walker with wheels.
Just fancy.
Very fancy, yeah. Well, she is fancy, so that's it. She is. But anyway, and the program will be about the recently revived essay contest. Years ago, we had an annual essay contest, and members, but membership isn't that expensive, members would be able to submit essays for consideration for a prize, a $200 prize for that matter. And the entries fell off, and we kind of walked away from it. Well, this year, 2023, 2024, we decided to revive it, and we formed a committee of 3. Deb Damon, who is here somewhere.
I'm right here.
Right there, thank you. Behind someone, okay. And Eileen Creighton, who's not here Creighton, I'm sorry, that's her maiden name. Eileen Walls. And Marilyn Zagarella-Weber, who's over here as well, were the 3 committee members who took the ball and ran with it. They modified the program to do 2 prizes, one for student, and hoping to open it up to a greater demographic, I suppose, and anything else, and encourage interest in younger people in local history. We started the program maybe December, whatever, and the deadline was to the end of February. I think that hurt a little bit. It was kind of a short time to do it in. We had 2 entries, and Dorothy Taylor's was one, and I have to explain this, I was the other. I kind of following in the tradition of the late Doc Whiting, who always used to enter and often would win and just say, well, but I won't take the money. And I had the same attitude. I have something I want to write, something I want to share, so I'll do it, but if I win, I won't take the money. Well, the committee decided to give each of the entrants the prize. So we have 2 presentations coming up at our next meeting at United Church of Christ. Doc Taylor's is wonderful. It's on memories of the Market Street School. I think I have that right? Which she started attending in 1933, because she's 95, which explains maybe why she's getting around with a rollator. But brilliant, brilliant recollections. And what came out of it for me, the lesson that came out of it for me is anyone can do this. I mean, she, I don't think, had to do a lot of research. This was her personal memories of something that was, to her, important in history. And reading it now, I mean, the school is long gone. She talks about a building that had an outhouse out back. They didn't put in plumbing until like her 2nd or 3rd year at that school. And so it's a time gone by, a way of schooling gone by, some phase of Rockland gone by, and just brilliantly recorded. And I'm thrilled that the committee, you know, decided to give her one of the prizes. But I think it opens it up to more people to understand that that is something we're looking for. That is something we want in our permanent records here, our memories of the towns, the 3 towns, Abington, Rockland, and Whitman. So I encourage people to apply the next round. I think we're going to relaunch the program actually as soon as our May meeting and give people the better part of a year to do this. So, and everyone will wait till the end, we know that. But nonetheless, we hope to encourage, again, more entries by increasing the time span in which you can submit. So we'll naturally talk more about that. Yeah, okay, what did I write about? Back in 2012, I began to hear about the Abington shoe. And Timberland was making the Abington shoe because Timberland started as the Abington shoe. And as everyone knows, the Abington shoe started in Abington. No, it didn't. But it got to the point where people, oh, what building was it in? And where were they? And the more recent one was in front of the depot, in North Abington Center at Arnold Park. We lost a tree, I think maybe last fall or something, in a storm, and someone was actually went on social media and said, oh my God, that's the logo tree for Timberland. No, it's not. So I really delved into debunking that. Where were they started? How did they come about the name? Why didn't we hear about them until 2010? That name, at least. And that's the story I told in my essay. So it was a research piece. And I love doing stuff like that. I mean, how many people grew up believing that Manamuskegon means land of many beavers? It doesn't, you know? And there's another one to be written. Where did that come from? And I know, so maybe I'll write a paper on it. Anyway. So that's coming up. That's a long story about what's coming up, but I really wanted to plug the whole essay contest and the possibilities for all of you to enter it and share memories or research something that's important to you. So anyway, today we are joined by Donald Cann. Thank you for being here, first of all.
You're welcome.
Donald is a former president of the Historical Society of Old Abington. He had my job before I had it, a few terms before I had it. And he has written a few books, usually with John Galuzzo. Have they all been with John, I think?
No, there was one
Okay.
that I did with somebody else,
Okay.
but not not local. It was,
Okay.
and we did books on the Hours of Shows off New Hampshire,
Okay.
and we did.
But he's done the more contemporary Rockland history books, the postcard book and the photo book. And so he's quite the expert at it, and he's lived in Rockland a very long time on Union Street, which is something we're going to talk about quite a bit today. And we talked about how to handle today's presentation. We're going to back up a little bit and backtrack, particularly for those who weren't here last time, and talk about the early grants and eventually talk about the importance how Union Street really begins to anchor the history of the town as it was a new town as it grew. So that's kind of a broad topic. And where do you want to start?
Well, I want to start by giving a couple of shout-outs.
Cool.
And
Cameraman's going to be busy.
I want to recognize Pam Ryan in the back.
In the back.
Pam is the new, she's the new chair of the
Commission?
Excuse me, the Rockland Historical Commission, and
Nice.
the former chair up until Pam's time is sitting right beside her, Jim Paul. And
Who's also an electrician and has been at least part-wise, the wiring inspector in Rockland, so
And
he's
I-
very official.
I expect that Jim and Pam and as other members of the Rockland Historical Commission here will help us in the
They're going to tell you if you're wrong?
conversation.
Is that what you're telling us? They're going to correct you if you're wrong?
I hope so.
Okay. I have to say, because I said it in publicity in terms of some people like to refer to Abington as West Rockland. That was Jim Paul. I blame him and credit him.
And Van, who gave the first thing, he's likewise helped me, and I'll also give some shout-outs to the friends. I won't name them all, but I have some people from the Boston Harbor Islands
Oh my goodness.
that I worked with, my colleagues there. They've come to hear my conversation.
Perfect.
Our conversation.
Okay.
So I think we have a little
We have-
trivia to start with.
Oh, that's fun. Yes, absolutely. There was a committee to come up with the name of the new town. And historically, what is passed down to us is this list. I think I might have been the first person to alphabetize it and say, wait a minute, how many of these names begin with A's? Were they threatened that they would no longer be the first city, town, whatever, on the list of towns in Massachusetts, like Abington is and was? Or not? I mean, Alberg had 2 A's. They would have been in front of Abington. So I have to wonder if the committee was looking at that saying, well, let's do A names. Andrew, Don, did you tell me Andrew was the governor at the time or something?
Andrew is the Massachusetts governor during the time of the Civil War.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, that came from somewhere. But I love commotion. I mean, they certainly created a
I
commotion.
think commotion was the conversation about
About separating, absolutely. But they narrowed it down to a list of finalists. And I don't know what, Hadley's not supposed to be underlined. I'm sorry, it's just graphics. But these were the top choices, again, in alphabetical order. Well, we know what the top choice was. Obviously, it won. It was Rockland. Anyone want to guess what the second choice was? What one?
I have
Hatherley?
at 69 votes.
Don't give it away. Come on. We want them to guess.
It's a conversation.
It doesn't work if you're giving away all the answers. Okay, which one got the least votes? How about that?
Commotion.
No. Believe it or not, no, Commotion didn't get the least votes. East Abington. No one wanted the name Abington. They wanted to be early in the list, but they didn't want to be Abington anymore. Unlike Whitman, of course, who broke away as South Abington and didn't change it for years. But no, Rockland wasn't going to do that. Anyway, here is the pecking order. Rockland got 114 votes, Hatherley 69, Andrew 19, Commotion 2, and East Abington 1.
By the person who came up with it, right?
Probably.
The meeting was held, by the way, before it was Rockland,
Oh, yeah.
and it was held in a hall.
East Abington.
No, it was
No.
held in a hall that's still in. Well, the hall's gone, but the hall was in Abington near St. Bridget's School.
Oh, okay.
St. Bridget's Church. So they
Probably the town building on
yeah, it was a building
right on
big enough to
Central
hold-
Street. Yeah. Yeah.
hold enough people to.
Well, it didn't hold enough people. We talked about that last time. The town had gotten so big to take votes, yay and nay. They went out to the railroad tracks.
East
Oh, it did
Abington
this.
people
But they actually went out to the railroad tracks, and the yays were on one side of the tracks and the nays were on the other. That's how they were doing votes, because they couldn't accommodate everyone in the town building.
Incidentally, the railroad tracks, there wasn't a bridge there at that time. The railroad tracks were at street level.
Because we dropped the street level to go under them, so they wouldn't have to ring the bells during Mass. Seriously, we did.
So,
I'm
anyway.
told. Okay.
So we have a slide of
Which one do you want?
the
My order's different from his, so we're going to be kind of thumbing
we're going to
through.
do the map of the grants.
Oh, the grants map. Okay. I like. Oh, there we. Wasn't that far. There's the grants map.
So in colonial times, the governors didn't have any money, but they had land which they negotiated with the natives. And if you did a task worthy of getting a reward, they gave you land, plenty of land. And so
They had plenty to give.
what is about 2/3 of the, you can see the label, number one, 2/3 of what Rockland, or East Abington is the Hathaway grant. In fact, it's part of the seal of Rockland. And then there was a lot of conflicting grants overall, and so some straightening out and making it official. For instance, the Hathaway grant was given west of the West Scituate line, and the West Scituate line was never surveyed. They didn't know where it was.
It's from that tree to that tree, right? Basically.
The only line that was in 1640, I think the date is the line at the top of the map here, and that's the Accord line, and that was done to formally separate two colonies in Massachusetts, the Plymouth colony and the Mass Bay colony. There seems to be a squabble over on the coast about the marshlands, which marshlands were in which colony and which marshlands in the other. It's also the county line now, and it's really a straight line that goes all the way to the Rhode Island. So if you go to Weymouth, you pass the Accord line, and you go from one county to the other and one town to the other.
And we have a monument there, the heap of stones.
We do in one place, and there's a legend. I don't know if anybody's ever corrected this legend.
Probably not. We're still the land of many beavers, so.
The middle of Accord Pond is the line, and they want to mark that line, but they couldn't figure it out until somebody suggested that they put the monument stone on the ice, and when the ice thaws, the monument is marked at the bottom of the pond.
Dive.
I would love to have somebody go there and prove that right. So let's go to the next one.
Okay, which is the next one you want? Yours?
And yes. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, other way. There we go.
There it
That's
is.
yours. That's your hand reaching up with a house.
The hand of Cann is in that thing. That plan, a little map, didn't exist with the hand in the house, but I used it for a
Right there. There we are.
for a campaign card when I was running. One of the times I ran for planning board, and so I modified it. Planning board deals with building new buildings all over the place, so I modified it. But it's very interesting. This is right at Accord Pond, and you see the mill here, and you see what looks like logs. I said Accord Pond. I didn't mean that.
It's Reeds, isn't it?
It's Reeds, Studley Reeds.
Pond has like 5 names.
And it was really
blame Rockland.
French's pond to begin with. French was the first mill owner. He created the dam, and successful after him came Studley and Reed.
It's labeled French's River on here, and I think nowadays we call it French's Stream, but
well,
it's the one, half dozen of the other.
That was a little hyperbole, I think, to call it a
Probably.
river. But the mill owner got to name the the pond, and French got the name of the river as well. So this is one of the neighborhoods that existed. This is one of the early neighborhoods. There were several neighborhoods, one here, one by the Weymouth line called Boxbury, and another one closer to the Hanover line. This grew because the trees. Hathley Grant was acquired by a group in Hingham, and that group passed it on to others, and got passed on, and never was broken up until about the 1740s. And in 1740s, actually in probably 1730, people started to move in because they were cutting the trees. It's a virgin forest. There was a big demand for wood. Some of the wood from old Abington went to build the Constitution, the ship Constitution. But it's a big demand, so therefore the mill. The mill did exist just about where Phelps Insurance Company is now. The last mill owner actually made wooden boxes at that mill.
Cool.
So the mill is an economy. It attracts people. You see all these houses. Many of them existed up until the 1970s. Some of the earliest things, even with the town of Rockland, as many of us know, that they moved an early Cape, the 1745 house. They moved it up by the high school. It was generally neglected, and a fire took it, and it's long gone now.
Now, for point of local reference and recent reference, this is Market Street, is it not?
Yes,
Do I have my bearings right?
Market Street, and
we
that
go
was,
around
that
the
was
corner
the way to the center,
to Center Ave.
the way to the church, the first congregational church established in
Had to get there.
Center. Doug's going to talk about churches a little later. So that was one of the highways. The road is right on top of the dam. And there's the economy. And that economy in this house, just to the right of the house, there's a Reed house, that people who own the dam. And people were quite interested in developing a community here, and the formation of the Congregational Church. The committee met there. A parishioner donated the land. The land was in the woods.
It was.
There was no road to it. They built the church. They asked the town. One of the squabbles that East Abington had is that they got outvoted. They didn't get what they thought they should from the town meeting, from the town government. And the road was one of those things which we know as Union Street. The town refused to build the road.
And we see Union Street did get built, of course.
Yeah, the Plymouth County mandated the town to build the road, and it's straight as an arrow, like as a Roman engineer
Here
designed
to
it.
here,
And it unites the neighborhoods. It unites this neighborhood we just saw, and it unites a neighborhood called Boxbury up on the Weymouth line.
Well, one thing we talked about last time is how brilliant it was, because this was their connection to Columbian Square, where Abington, the western part of Abington, the central part of Abington, and down into South Abington had the old Setauket Trail that went north-south. And East Abington had really nothing north-south. Liberty was kind of there, but it really didn't go far enough. So they put the church in the middle of nowhere.
That's correct.
They built a street in front of it that connected Boxbury and Market Street.
That's correct.
And gave themselves access, prestige, location. It was brilliant. It was town planning.
It's at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
Absolutely.
Also. Now there was a thoroughfare. It's Route 3A now. And that ran all the way to Boston to Plymouth. In fact, as early as 1810, there was stagecoach service on there. So there's a route to the market.
Absolutely.
so to speak.
And of course, the earliest shoe production, we think, was Boxbury, was it not?
Yes.
Okay. So that was the northern part, up here.
Yep.
Now, not only did they get Union Street built, they got North Ave built, and they got Webster Street built.
Yes.
So those streets are like kind of straight as an arrow. That's why. Those weren't Indian trails. Those were man-made, laid out streets. And it gave them the north-south connection, and it gave them a pretty good east-west connection,
Yes.
too. So
Yes.
again, town planning. They were brilliant.
So places like Abington were inland.
Yes.
And essentially they weren't the first towns built, but they were the towns that had the land reserve, and the first towns were built on the coast. And they didn't need particularly roads because they had the ocean and they just put everything
Put it on a boat.
Right. So
Where to next?
let's go to the next.
That's Union Street.
That's Union
One of the
Street.
earliest pictures we know.
And there's the church, the first church that
Got
they
moved
built.
back.
I believe there was a remodeling. It was probably designed after a patent book. Patent books
Oh, I expect, yeah.
were out, and if you go through New England, you find these little churches all look the same.
Surprise.
So at this point, it's moved back, it's pushed back, and it's turned into a shoe factory. And there's the second church that the congregation.
The Brown Church.
The Brown Church. But let's keep going. I just wanted to
Okay.
point out the church because it's, here we are, Mr. Studley.
Now we're talking about government. We have a new town.
We're not going to start with Mr. Studley.
Okay, what do you want to start with?
We're going to start with the petition, the argument
Ah,
that the East Abington
This
people
one.
made before the committee in the legislature, the Committee for Towns and Cities. By the way, South Abington and East Abington went up a couple of years before. They got voted down, so they separated. And those who wanted to keep East Abington in the town lawyered up, and those who wanted to separate and form the town of Rockland lawyered up. And Doug's going to read a little bit of the presentation that was made to the committee on the behalf of the town of Rockland.
I get a speaking part. Isn't this cool? Anyway, I'm reading from the conclusion of this document. And it was kind of the summary of, okay, why should you do this? Why should you vote to separate? My brother says the East Abington people are not a dead people. No, gentlemen, they are not. Dead people never dissolve old partnerships and strike out independently in fresh directions. Dead people never assume the aggressive in a contest against great odds. Dead people never ask the legislature for enlarged authority to spend their money on public improvements in the nurseries of learning, schools. Dead people did not bring to these walls the petitions for the incorporation of the now thriving towns of Hyde Park, Everett, and Holbrook. Truly, the petitioners are not dead people. They are a people surcharged with vital energy, an energy that has built up the new town you are asked to recognize and accept, an energy that will push forward the development of that town till its present limits are lost in growth. You are not asked to create a new town. The creation is complete. The petitioners have wrought it out. It stands wholly independent in appearance and in fact of all other places. We only ask that you invest it with the legal character to which it is entitled. I have now reached the most affecting point of my eloquent brother's argument, that point where he pictures the advancement of East Abington under her benign association with the center and her right and left-hand neighbors, north and south, and then adverts with becoming severity to the proposed ungracious conduct of the petitioners by which they would impose upon the rest of the town its future municipal burdens. Let us weep, gentlemen, over the poverty of this ungratefully abandoned town. Let us weep over the misery of poor center Abington, whose dwellings are reputed to be piled to the eaves with government bonds, while their owners live luxuriously in the sweet atmosphere of sentiment and particularly ancient boundary sentiment. But, Mr. Chairman, before we weep, let us compare the per capita valuation of unthankful East Abington, which is $430, with the per capita valuation of the deserted town, which is $494. Sir, with $64 per capita in their favor, perhaps after all the forsaken ones may bear their burdens with a fair degree of comfort and possibly a sense of relief. Finally, the Learned Counsel asks, is it the policy of the Commonwealth to divide towns? Yes, in the fullest sense of the word, in all the broadness of its meaning, it is the policy of this Commonwealth, as her records amply prove, to reconstruct old boundaries to fit new communities. It is her policy to recognize the growth of obscure villages into the stature of towns and to grant them municipal independence. This steady policy and its wisdom also are abundantly established in the bright history of 70 new towns incorporated since the year 1800. It is the policy that the Commonwealth owes a large share of its material prosperity today. It is under this encouraging policy that the determined exertions of many small communities will raise them into the ranks which your successors will crown with charters. The chairman interrupted. I must inform you, your allotted time has expired. He kept talking. Mr. Morton, I pray the indulgence of the committee but a moment. I have before me a printed copy of the last year's argument of one of the learned counsel of the opposition, Mr. Simmons, who is also counsel here now. The same baseless theory of excitement on the part of the petitioners was advanced then, as it has been less confidently in this hearing. I only desire the committee to act upon Mr. Simmons' recorded proposition. It is this, quote, now if they, the petitioners, could have a year to get cool, I would leave the whole thing to the sober second thought of my friends of East Abington, notwithstanding all their natural pride of opinion. Mr. Chairman, the year has elapsed. I ask you, gentlemen, in behalf of my distinguished friend, to receive with favor the, quote, sober second thought, unquote, of the petitioners and recommend to the legislature the passage of the act for which they respectfully pray.
Do I have an applause from?
Well, it worked.
It worked. It worked. And do we have Mr. Studley?
Yes, we have Mr. Studley. He is right there. Ezekiel R.
Ezekiel stands for what does
Rumpelstiltskin, but don't worry about it.
Reed.
Oh, figures.
Studley.
But he was from Hanover, wasn't he?
He was born in Hanover.
Yeah.
He was active in the
he has very shifty eyes, by the way. Very shifty eyes.
Town government, and he became, or I would say, overactive in the Rockland town government. He's known as the father of Rockland, but he kept a diary, and he kept a diary of the day that the announcement of the new town was made, and it reads Wednesday, March 4th, 1874. Tonight about 5 o'clock, we got a telegram. Victory, stop. 94 to 115, stop. Signed A.F. Kelly. So it was overwhelming voted in the legislature to form the town.
My speech worked.
Your speech worked. As the train came in, hundreds collected at the depot and bubbled over with shouts, guns, and cheers. It was better than expected. And then he writes the next day in his diary, Thursday, March 5, 1874. Demonstrations continued last night to a late hour. Bonfires, guns, bands, music, with ringing bells were all in the order of the night. And then on March 10th, he writes, which is a Tuesday, I have been up to the townhouse. The townhouse, by the way, is another mansard building. They protested one and then adopted another one. The mansard type of buildings were the rage. It was the modern thing. It all stems from the French influence in the Second Empire.
Second Empire,
the Third.
Architect Louis Mansart, who gave us the Louvre as a
That's right.
palace.
Right.
He made popular the style.
So he's been to the townhouse today, making a list of voters for the town of Rockland. It counts 955. And then on Wednesday, March 11th, 1874, I went to see them start the fireworks. At 9 o'clock, very soon, an alarm of fire was given, and I went for it. I guess he went to see it. The fire was in the shoe manufactory of A.W. Perry, a name that is popular, and a firm that's active today on Vernon Street. And by some mistake and confusion, the engine got sent down to William G. Perry's. This made them late to arriving at the burning building, which was half burnt down by the time they got there.
Wrong address.
And a dwelling closest to. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But anyway, the point here is that there was big celebrations at the beginning of the initiation of the town.
Yes.
Quick question, Donald. When did Rockland get chosen as a name?
It got chosen before the town, and it was chosen in the.
So that's why he was referring to Rockland in his
Yep.
bio.
Yep, it's interesting. If you go over to that case over there, you will see a letter, and you should go read it. I'll summarize it a bit. The man says, by the time you receive this letter, you'll be living in Rockland.
That was the "we won" sort of telegram. The original Division of Rockland closing argument indeed says, on behalf of the petitioners, for an act to incorporate that part of Abington called East Abington as a new town called Rockland. And this was dated Thursday, February 5th, 1874. So they knew, at least by the time they were doing the final argument, that they wanted that name. But one of my favorite switchover stories, we were talking about starting a new government, starting a new everything else. The East Abington post office closed on one day, and they opened the next morning as the Rockland post office. That was probably the easiest switch that there was in the creation of the new town. I don't know if you were going to talk about what Studley did.
Well, Studley was a one-man.
He was like everything but the dog catcher, and he might have been that too.
He was chairman of the select board from 1876 to 1878.
I have him as town clerk, town
He was
treasurer,
town clerk.
tax collector,
Yeah.
and one of the three original selectmen. I think on the school committee too, as well. Again, he had his fingers in everything.
He was, he was a one-man government.
Yeah.
In fact.
Yeah.
And he was also a justice of peace, and he was treasurer of the Rockland Savings Bank.
There are people today who'd be jealous of that kind of power.
They would, but it was something that had to be done at that time.
Absolutely, and he was the guy to do it.
Yes.
One of the amazing things that, just in terms of my looking through stuff, I volunteer here, is the people who really built the town in terms of establishing the bank and you know, making sure that there was, you know, an infrastructure there were Civil War veterans.
Mm-hmm.
They came home from the war and they made sure that where they lived was, you know, up to standard, and I was pretty amazed with that. These men's organizations predominantly that really, you know, said this is how we have to build our town. It's really inspiring, actually.
Let me ask Pam, can you add about the Civil War veterans? Pam has done a great bunch of research on Rockland war veterans.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What are you asking her about the Civil War veterans? You're referring to Deb's question?
Yes.
Yeah, I just mentioned that I was impressed by how the Civil War veterans came home to Rockland and really decided that there needed to be a bank and that the roads needed to be improved and all of that kind of thing. I was just sort of impressed by how invested, after coming out of what they came out of, they were in terms of building their community.
I agree.
Yeah, that's good to see. And interesting, the Civil War, of course, started and ended before Abington split. And yet each of the three towns had their own Grand Army of the Republic Hall. And that, a quick story about that one, I had a request a couple of years ago from someone who was tracing where government donated cannons went to. And he said, I find in the records that Abington received 4 cannons. Where are they?
They're not in Rockland.
Thank you. No, yeah, they are.
They're not in Rockland.
I swear they are.
They're not.
2 at the GAR Hall and 2 at the cemetery.
There's Cann.
We're gonna argue about
there's
this.
Cann and Rockland.
Yes, there are.
But they never belonged to Abington.
Well, I think because Rockland never had soldiers in the Civil War, I think
But they
Rockland
did
had to apply for them under the guise of Abington, but they received them.
I think it was the GAR, which was in Rockland, and it still is in Rockland.
Still is.
Applied. And the government announced that they were shipped to the Navy Yard, that they agreed to give Rockland the cannon. Somebody volunteered to go and fetch them at no cost, and they were if you want to see them, or if anybody in Abington wants
to go see the cannons,
they're still there.
2 at the cemetery and 2 at the GAR Hall.
I don't know about the cemetery.
Yeah, I think they were all 4 were there until the GAR got built.
Yes.
But anyway, okay.
But I just want to get back to Studley.
Go.
In case you missed it, he was, let me see, he was a selectman. He was overseer of the poor. He was the assessor. He was a town clerk.
Yeah.
And some of the other things I mentioned. He was really the father of the town at that time.
And yet I had read about the time of division. He kind of kept out of it. He really wasn't necessarily outspoken.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. If anybody here can. I can't speak to that.
I read it, so I mean, I have no other knowledge. In fact, I read it somewhere that he kind of held back.
But I want to close the section on Mr. Studley.
Go for it.
We established that he was active enough.
Yeah.
And
distinguished.
Really deserves a title.
Distinguished. Yes.
Of the town.
I heard there was an obituary for him that was very impressive.
And my friend Jack has the obituary to read.
Oh, he's got a reading part. I'm jealous. Do you want to come up here, or?
I'll just stand and hopefully the bellows are working.
Mr. Cameraman, are we good with that? Okay, we're good with that.
This is the obituary. Apparently his death date is 1916, so they're summarizing somebody's 19th century life. In the passing of town clerk Ezekiel R. Studley, Rockland has lost one of its grandest and foremost men. Mr. Studley was in reality the father of the town. He helped organize it, and he loved every bit of it. Although a native of an adjoining town, Mr. Studley was always loyal to Rockland. He knew every man, woman, and child in it. And there is no doubt that the saying he expressed some time ago, "I don't know of an enemy that I have in Rockland," was true. Everybody who knew Mr. Studley respected and loved him. He was true as steel, always courteous and obliging, and lived a good, clean life. He was of the old school and had no patience with fads of any kind. He loved the finer things of life and enjoyed comradeship. He believed in Rockland and in his fellow man. He saw the good in all men, and yet he had his ideals. The love and respect in which he was held was well expressed a few weeks ago when representative men of the town assembled to arrange to do him public honor while he was yet alive. Unfortunately, these plans had to be dropped on account of the health of Mr. Studley, but the tribute given him on that evening will never be forgotten by those who were there. Mr. Studley has gone. Rockland will miss him. He has passed on to the ages. Everybody who knew him, mourns and reveres his memory. His was a useful life and was not lived in vain.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, well, I think we have some more slides.
Just one question. What year did he pass away?
Was that 1960?
1916.
16.
1916, sure.
And he was born in 1930 something.
1830.
I mean 1830.
We knew, but where do you want to jump to next? We're like 45 minutes into our program. Where do you want to go?
We'd like to see some of the things that the town did.
Okay.
So do we have?
You want schools or poorhouse or churches or
I would like to see the
industry
poorhouse.
or okay. There.
One of the issues of the town was the poorhouse. And I see somebody smiling because we have the tramp house over there to the right, and the Historical Commission has certainly spent a lot of money and time and effort in restoring the tramp house. Tramps were a common thing, and Rockland took a big interest in the welfare of its citizens, hence the poorhouse, and the welfare of people traveling through, hence the tramp house. So as soon as, see, I have a date on the almshouse was the first section. This was built in 1876.
Over there?
That's soon after the founding of town.
Yeah.
It was expanded
2 years.
in 1899, and it took care of people of need up until 1979. It was almost torn down. It's on the National Register now, and it was because of the school department. It was the time that they were organizing their collaboratives, and North River Collaborative is the people who
Current
operate
occupants
from this building.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
I have a question.
And
Yes, Deb.
Do you know what it transformed into? It wasn't always a poorhouse, and you said, how long did it last up till?
it closed in 1979.
So I have this recollection of it being a rest home for a gentleman at one point.
In its latter days, it was operated. I don't know how it was operated, but it might have been operated privately. But it was still owned by the town.
Okay. I think I sang Christmas carols there when I was a little girl. That's why I'm asking.
Great memory.
But it was. You can see by the date. The initial date of the almshouse was a concern. The poor were a big concern of the new town of Rockland.
I'm talking like 1964, 1965, something like that.
Yeah, I can't speak exactly what was there, but I know there were people in need living there right up to about the end.
Okay.
In one form or another.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. We have schools. We have
I would like
media.
to see the school.
Okay. That was the school.
Yep, this is the school. You saw the school with Van's talk that was the spark that united the.
I like to say the straw that broke the camel's back was right down here on Dunbar Street, the mansard abomination.
Yeah, and there's still mansards down there built in
Yeah, don't go there.
1970s.
Apartments, condos, whatever they are, yeah.
All right, that's the school that Rockland got,
And they stayed within
It's
budget.
Very similar to the school that Whitman got.
And they stay within budget, and also very similar to the Adams Street
About
School at
12,000
North Abington. got.
$12,000.
Yeah, yeah, they held on. But then after Rockland became its own town, it continued school building
Right.
and did this rather significant one, the Lincoln School.
This is the Lincoln School. It was the high school when it was built, and it was built within 25 years of the forming of the town. 1892 I have in that school. The last use I know was part of the collaborative had the North River School in there. The tower was taken down and a little extension was put on this side, that porch you see there ended up into a, I think they had the students doing repairs of small engines in there.
So this is
the life of this school. It still exists, but it's depending on town meeting, it may disappear for a fire station, a new fire station. So, if you want to see it, go fast.
See it now or forever, yeah. Now this is at the corner of Church Street and Liberty, is that right? No.
It's
Howard, thank you.
Okay.
And so it was right down the street from the first church.
yes.
Right.
But I point them out because there are two things from the first period
Right.
of the town that still exist,
Right.
public buildings.
Absolutely. And we have media to talk about. You want to do that?
What?
Newspapers.
Oh, we have newspapers.
We have newspapers. We do. We have the Rockland Independent.
Yes, we had two newspapers in Rockland. Both of them existed before Rockland.
Got to get the word out. We have the Independent, and we have also the Rockland Standard.
The Rockland Standard really became a regional newspaper, and the name may still exist. I'm not sure.
I don't know about that.
Does
it?
It was either
Anyone
the
getting the
Standard
Standard?
or the Mariner, and mostly news of someplace else.
Absolutely. Now, a fun historical story regarding the Standard is Abington's longtime doyen of Abington history, who was born in Tennessee, Martha Campbell, had a regular column that appeared in the Rockland Standard, the research reporter, and we have probably every copy of it in this building. And she was a past president of the society, and actually the essay contest that we now run was funded in memory of her by her late husband. So the funding from that comes from the Martha Campbell estate, if you will. But it was always interesting that an Abington resident was doing a weekly column on local history in the Rockland paper that held on for a good long time. I mean,
Well,
that had huge readership.
Martha was asked
I love this story. Yeah.
a question why she had so many articles on Rockland and so few articles on
Abington or Whitman.
and Whitman, and she said, well, it's because of the paper. It's the Rockland
Standard. She knew who was who her master was, so to speak.
And you notice it's the mansard.
Of course, had to be.
Is that Union Street?
I believe so.
It's on Union Street. It's just a few doors down from. Do we have the Phoenix Hall?
Yes, we do. We were talking about where local government was based initially, and it had a few different houses, so to speak, on Union Street, and this was Phoenix, which you can tell us more
Phoenix
about.
Hall was the first place for the Rockland town offices. Rockland never had a town hall until the 1970s, and was sort of they forced into it. Their last rented place was set on fire, and they got funds. If you look on the side of this photograph,
Over here?
you see it. That's where Park Street was built, and you see a shoe companies down there.
Right.
In fact, that.
Was
That
this blocking?
smokestack in that building, although the building was a derelict, the
Yeah.
smokestack was pretty straight. That was taken down within the last 5 years.
Was this like blocking Park Ave, or Park Ave ran next to it?
I don't think Park Ave was built
At that time?
Right.
Okay, so it might have been at the head of where Park Ave is now. Okay. And then from here, town offices moved to the Gladstone block, or did it go to Concord Street next?
No, it had in the savings bank building.
Oh, okay, which we have here,
Yep.
also known as the Opera House,
The Opera House, it had an auditorium.
on the top.
And could have larger meetings, and the town offices were there. They were also, there's a building on the corner of Concord and Market Street where town offices were also. And the last building before the current, the only town hall that we ever had in Rockland is the Gladstone building.
Okay, so the Gladstone was the one just I had before it
Yeah,
right
there's
here.
the Gladstone
That's now a
building.
parking lot for the Rockland
Trust.
Trust.
Yep.
Okay. And we see the trolley tracks running up the street here.
Yep.
Just a quick architectural note on like the Opera House. Most of the large buildings from that period had some sort of village hall on the top of them. And it took me going to architecture school to understand why. From an access point of view, it's the worst possible place. It's the top floor. The stairs were steep. You had to get up there, but you had these big open spaces under the roof, and the roof didn't need a lot of support. So we had the lower floors full of columns, which had offices and stores that could be broken up by columns without having a problem, but you couldn't have a big hall broken up by columns. So you put them on the top floor where everything underneath it supported it, but the roof was kind of self-supporting, so it was able to accommodate them. Right next door here, or 2 doors down, we had the savings bank block, and it had, again, on the top floor, it had a hall. In North Abington, I think there were 2 of them, the Winthrop block and the Standish block. They both had halls on the top floors. This is just what you did. And it was not uncommon also to have a town clock, a town bell that also rang for the fire department. In Rockland, that was in the church.
Yep, it was in a church.
In fact, it was in that church.
It was in.
Sorry.
Go back to the other.
That one.
Yeah. There's the Congregation Church.
There's the bell.
Just a little bit about the bell.
And there's the clock.
And the clock. The town gave the church the clock and the bell. And they did it for purposes of town safety, because they had an apparatus from the fire department that they could. This is in a period when they could run electrical wire. So the fire department could, the apparatus is incidentally still in that tower, could make the bell ring in case of fire, and they could.
There's a fire bell.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We still need to talk about factories and transportation and churches. So where do you want to go next?
I would like to see the Main Street of another. Don't we have another picture of the Main Street?
Let me think. What do we got?
Yep.
Well, we did that one already.
Okay.
That's the Gladstone.
Yep.
I don't know if we have another Main Street.
No, you can show some of the factories.
Okay. The factories.
Just stop here.
This is a good one to stop with, yeah, because
Yep.
transportation plays into the factories. The Rockland train station.
In the late, the old colony line was started and it was being built in the 1850s, and
Earlier, actually.
connected the main line connected Center Abington and Whitman. It did not connect Rockland or East Abington at all. And probably because there wasn't a town of Rockland and just a precinct of Rockland at the time they built it, it was not on the main line. However, a box maker in Hanover decided that he needed and wanted to connect to this main line by a railroad. And so a man named Perry chartered a railroad. It was built just after the Civil War. It's called the Hanover Branch Line. It's currently a rail trail in the same towns that the railroad was, Hanover, Rockland, and Abington. And so now the connection to the shoe business is not just by road, it's by rail.
Here we go. I love this one because it's showing
The building is still there.
parts of it, yeah.
And you see all the different switching and tracks that were once there.
Was this the biggest factory in Rockland?
I don't know.
The Rice and Hitchings, does anyone know? It seems to have been. I mean,
1,000 windows.
yeah, I mean, because I've seen one photo and it was like a panorama and it took up the whole thing. It was an amazingly long, stretched out. So there's parts of it left, and I think we call it the sandpaper factory now. Is that the right one?
Oh.
Yeah, but the tracks were here and they serviced it. And we show one more factory, which was important to me. E.T. Wright. Not only were they a long-term survivor, I believe they were established the year after the town was established. And they were not next to the railroad. They were a little bit of a hike, but
Well, it was the shoes that made the economy. We talked
Absolutely.
a little bit about the economy of the wood that was
Early.
harvested in the beginning and caused people to move into East Abington. But at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, just before the railroads were built or anything else, but when Union Street was built, in the north part of Union Street, the Hunts and others decided that they would get in the business of making commercial shoes. Shoes previously to that, people made the farmers and in the winter made shoes for the family and so forth, and few shoes were sold in stores. So the Hunts decided they would throw their thing in and make shoes, and it developed into a sort of a cottage industry. And behind people's houses and on lots, there were small buildings built called 10 by 10s, some were much larger than 10 by 10s.
we have a small one here in our parking lot, actually.
There's a small one in the parking
Yeah.
lot. I don't know if that's an original or,
No.
or a reproduction.
It's a reproduction.
Reproductions. And so they developed a little bit of an assembly line where in the first shop on the street would make the soles, and the second shop would make the uppers, and then the third shop would sew the two together, and then it would go to the next shop until they were boxed and shipped. And well, there was two engines that changed everything. One was the steam engine.
Yeah.
And when the steam engine came, the ability to get into factories, and along the way, machines are being built. And it was rather easy to get into the shoe business because all this machinery were owned, the patents and the machinery was owned by the United Shoe Machinery. And so they leased them. They had a monopoly. So the investor in a shoe business didn't have to buy any equipment. All he had to do was start leasing it. There were plenty of skilled shoemakers. Shoe companies came and went in the vicinity, so he needed to rent a building and hire the skilled shoe makers and lease the equipment. And so many shoe companies were here. Some, we actually read about one that was on fire during the celebration.
Absolutely. And they went to the wrong one. Okay, maybe spiritual life in churches? What do you think?
Okay.
Let's get back to that, and that's in here somewhere.
This
No, I'm going the wrong way.
is Doug's part of the conversation.
Oh, you can jump in. You know a lot about it.
I had a question about the shoe companies.
Yes.
Do we know, like, if women were working there, if kids were working there?
I know women were.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Kids, I don't know.
Child labor, you mean?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Did the women take over, like, during the war? Were there still some men left?
I think they were. I really am going back to like Emerson Shoe. I used to actually have an office in the building at one point in time, and there are photographs of women working the assembly lines, mostly as stitchers, as I recall. And the trick was, if you notice, they're full of windows because, in terms of artificial light, it didn't really exist. So they needed to be near windows for that. But so I mean, I know men and women. I don't know about children. I've not seen pictures of them working. It wouldn't surprise me, if they did.
I think my grandmother actually, so this would be about 19,
Yeah.
1910, something like that, made boxes as a child.
Okay.
Yep.
They were involved in industry.
Boxes, tacks.
Oh, that's,
And-
we think
and-
Whitman more for that,
And
but yeah.
later on, adhesives were all
Yeah.
necessary for the shoe companies.
Absolutely.
Companies.
Yeah, we had a webbing company just here in North Abington
And
too.
just a footnote, the Emerson Shoe Factory, which had the fourth floor artists
Artists, I was there.
in it. And the man who owned it,
When?
Wynn?
Yeah.
Yep, Wynn called a window guy and said he had 100, he wanted to buy 100 some windows, and the phone went click.
Those are big windows too. But yeah, and of course that could, like most of them, now get converted to housing. But I wanted to talk about churches. Yes.
Wait,
Oh.
the question.
Oh, sorry.
Railroad
Mr.
station.
Baker?
That building you showed in the picture, does that still exist within the former Dunkin' Donuts and liquor store building? or
That was a previous train station, I believe.
that one?
The train station I showed.
Well, it's actually the train station's there. The liquor, there was a wooden station at the first.
At first.
And then the brick station is there. The person who initially opened the Dunkin' Donuts and added it, he took bricks and he added a layer of bricks around the old station. And then he built the Dunkin' Donuts sort of to blend into the old train station. So the old brick train station indeed is still there.
But is that brick station the one that was in the picture?
That was wood.
Wooden one.
That was wood.
He said he built it around it.
The wood station became
Newton,
before
yeah.
the brick station.
Absolutely.
So if you take off the outside
It's
layer
still
of
there?
bricks, you'll find the original
It's
bricks.
still there. I like it. We've talked in different programs over the years about the foundation of churches in town and how they actually provided the foundation for the town. And what was interesting to me, and a year or so ago we did something about the beginnings and ends of churches in the three towns, and I just kind of took it down to just Rockland, because I was curious as to how many churches came in after the separation, how many came into the new town versus how many were there ahead of time. Well, not surprisingly, the Third Congregational Church came in 1813, and that's the one that had the brilliant placement where it was, that and ran Union Street right in front of it and became the center of the entire town by putting a church there and running a road from Market Street right up to Columbian Square. Again, brilliant town planning. But that provided the basis for other things. I was surprised that the next church that came in was the Baptist came in. I have 1886 here. I think that's wrong. But anyway, but we see that the Unitarian Church and the Catholic Church came in after the split. The Episcopal came in many years later. And what else am I missing here? Hatherley Methodist, which of course would have been about in the Boxbury neighborhood, that came in just before the split, 1870. I think my date on the Baptist is wrong on this chart.
It's 56 then.
Pardon me?
I think it's 1856.
I think you're right, and I have 1886. I have the line in the right place and the number wrong, so I'm halfway right. But anyway, so this was interesting that, and the Baptist Church I remember was a precursor to the Abington Baptist Church. The Abington Church was like a mission from the Rockland Church, which was interesting to me as well. But Abington already had a Catholic church, but Rockland had their own. And it was built by immigrants, as you and I talked about earlier. Abington had a Unitarian church, as did Whitman, but Rockland then created their own. So there was a certain pride of place, pride of religion, pride of whatever that went along with a new community. And the Third Congo in Rockland, we already saw earlier that the first church got pushed back, the Brown Church got put in its place. The Brown Church plays enormously into the history of Rockland in terms of what happened to it and everything else. Brown Church, because they actually painted it brown and put silica or sand in the mix to make it look like stone. Brilliant idea until you decide to scrape the paint off of it to repaint it and use blowtorches to get rid of the old paint, forgetting there's sand in there that's holding the heat, and you set the whole freaking building on fire. And they did. So the Great Rockland Fire of 1880, am I right?
90.
1890, thank you. So here we have a community that's, what, 16 years old. And the center of town, because it didn't just take the church. It took, and that's the fire department, I didn't want that one yet. It took, this is Martha Campbell's work, it took out the whole block. And one thing that Rockland had done that kind of still tied it to the old town is they did a joint waterworks, which still exists today. But they didn't have enough water in the standpipe to fight the fire, and they didn't have enough pumpers to reach the top of the steeple. It was gone. It was gone. And of course, they had factory fires as well. So firefighting became a big deal, and water supply became a big deal. And I venture to say the supply issues were as interesting then as they are now, because a lot of the communities, Abington, Rockland, are holding back on new construction, saying we don't have enough water. We might have enough sewerage, but we don't have enough water. Well, they didn't have enough water either, and they lost most of downtown Rockland as a result of it.
What was the year of the fire?
1890.
Okay.
So anyway, it was interesting to see how that response was, and the fire department then was located where it is now. They tore this down, they added onto it first, they tore it down, they built a new one, they added onto that. And of course now the plan is, and by the way, Rockland, out of the 3 towns, is the only one that has survived right along with 1 fire station. And I blame it on Union Street again, everything's right there. And Abington has 2 currently. Whitman, I think, might be down to 1, but they had like 3. So it's a big issue. And Abington is also planning a new fire station, and that will be on Central Street near the Highway Department and the Police Department. Again, building it in a neighborhood and making it so you've got to drive through neighborhoods to get anywhere. And the Lincoln School is going to have the same issue with that site, so that's a concern. But in the end, they survived. They built new buildings. A lot of them are still there today. The Rockland Savings Bank, of course, was built after this, but it lost its upper floors.
The only building of that type that survived is the Flag Building in South
Yes,
Weymouth.
the Opera House there. Yeah, that, minus its turret, or its conical tower. But yeah, we still have that one as a large building of that type.
Just as Doug mentioned, just behind us, we had a large building like that, and then
The Savings Bank block, yeah.
and then the Savings Bank in Rockland.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's who could afford to build buildings like
But
that.
I must say that when they first tore it down, it was kind of ugly, flat roof.
Oh, yeah.
And then they fixed it up.
With a
so-
mansard, didn't they?
No, it was not a mansard.
No, okay.
Then they fixed it up so it looks like somewhat of the old
They gave it some class.
4-story building.
Was that torn down because, was there a fire in that building too?
The upper floors? I didn't think so. Was there in the Opera House?
They just tore it down?
Doug, they
Yes.
tore it down to get rid of the top floors.
Right, but I mean, it wasn't because of fire. No.
Oh,
they-
in Rockland, they just tore it down because the upstairs had no value anymore.
yeah, they didn't
And
need it.
it was a common thing, you see it in Boston, when you can't rent the top floors and you're still paying taxes for them, you take them off.
I've seen farmers put holes in barn roofs so that they don't get taxed as much for them. But anyway, in spite of all of they went through, and in spite of any animosity that may have happened, by 1912, the old town of Abington was celebrating a 200-year anniversary. Now, what I like to point out to people was that people in 1912 in Rockland or Whitman could very well have been born in Old Abington. So 1912 meant something to them. And as a result, the 3 towns got together and did a week-long celebration, as I recall. Each town had their own arch. This one I love, and I didn't do a photograph of. This one was illuminated. It lit up. It's surrounded by light bulbs all over, and the dates are in light bulbs and whatever. And there was a grand parade through the three towns, and they all went under the arches, and they started at one point with a town crier going from horseback from town to town with proclamations.
Is this where the arches in Whitman come from?
No, but they had an arch as well. But no, that's not the memorial arch there. It's a different one. That one's on South Ave, isn't it? Yeah, okay, no. This was on Washington, theirs was. It's a really hot day, too. People were passing out from that one. But anyway, and everyone got photographed going under this arch. This photograph came to us from the late John Barrows from Rockland. He had donated it when he moved away. I have it upstairs under glass. It's very good. So it was an interesting full circle that the three towns were now independent. They were established. They had their own economies. Rockland actually outgrew the other towns.
Yeah, I want to say something about the economy.
Please.
The shoe business,
Yeah.
at the point of the Civil War, was very robust. And in the center part of Abington, the story goes that they had a lot of contacts and contracts in the South. And when the Civil War started, they lost all that and went bust.
Mm.
But Rockland section, that is East Abington, got contracts from the Army to build Army boots and prospered during the Civil War. And so part of the reason why the East Abington wanted to be a separate town is that they seemed to not be getting a fair shake at town meeting in Center Abington. And they had more money than Center Abington.
They were feeling their oats.
And they decided that they had the means and the will to do this. And just a footnote on the contracts of shoe companies in the South. Years ago, there was an exhibition of the textile called Negro cloth, and how the textile companies in New England prospered on slavery. They bought the cotton that was picked by the slaves, they made it into clothes that they sold back to the Southern people for the slaves. So in other words, they got it at one end and got the money at the other end. In that exhibition, they showed shoes, Negro shoes for slaves. And I think some more research should probably go in to find out if and when Abington, and I'm talking about all of Abington at that point, the shoe companies of Abington, how much of their Southern contracts were
slave shoes.
Slave shoes.
Mm-hmm. Interesting topic. I have not seen anything written. If anyone wants to explore it, we would welcome that. On that note, we should probably wrap it up. We've kept you here longer than I expected we would. It's a big topic, and we have an expert to talk about it. But before I send you up for refreshments into the back, questions? Oh my goodness, we've answered everything? We're good.
Thanks for coming.
So anyway, I always do this at all of our meetings. How many people here are members of the Historical Society of Old Abington? Please raise your hands. Look around and see who didn't raise their hands and make sure you say hi. We have refreshments in the back room. We have a bunch of cakes today, or remains of cakes. Please help me eat them. I have this annual birthday ritual where I make one.
Happy birthday, Mom.
Thank you. I make one cake per day per decade. And there are 7 cakes up, were 7 cakes. I'll let you do the math. But anyway, so there's all different types of cakes from the past 7 days out there, which I would appreciate your help in eating. And there's other refreshments. I know Janet brought some. Everyone's brought stuff, and I appreciate that. We have membership forms on the table back here if you're interested in joining. An annual membership, I think at this point, is $20, and a lifetime is $100, and we survive only by membership fees at this point in time, so we appreciate your support. And any questions, we'll be hanging out and around and be happy to answer them. I thank you all for being here. You've been a fantastic audience.
Thank you.